welcome everyone in this new episode of Let's Talk AI. Super happy to be here today with Ole Olesen-Bagneux. Ole, how are you doing?
I'm fine. And how are you?
I'm very good. I'm super happy to have you on the show. I have many questions that I want to ask you about for everyone who is tuning in on this podcast. Let's Talk AI. We deep dive about data and AI with experts. And today we have the honor of having Ole. Ole, for the people who might not know you, could you maybe introduce yourself in a few words?
Yes, I'm happy to, Toman. Thank you for having me on. So my name is Ole Olesen-Bagneux, and bravo for the pronunciation. I am the chief evangelist in Senea. That is a French data catalog and data enterprise, data marketplace solution. We call ourselves a data discovery platform altogether. It's a really cool modern technology that I'm very happy to work with, powered by graphs. So my background is I live in Copenhagen. I've mostly worked in industry in and around Copenhagen. A Ph.D. in information science. I've written the book, The Enterprise Data Catalog, published with Orelli not so long ago. It was published 9, 10 months ago. So I'm very happy to get the chance to fly around mainly Europe and explain my ideas and what we do in Senea to various people and companies and associations.
That's amazing. Many questions regarding all the above.
Mhm.
um, it is a very impressive career path. So maybe just to understand you a little bit further, we'll get back on what you've been doing in the past and so on, like having a retrospective of your career. But I'd like to dive, linger on your state of the art, the state of the art of Ole. So,
Mhm.
what do I mean by that? What are you currently focused on? So, you mentioned your actual role, but what is your current mission? What are your current interests? And where is your curiosity at those days?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think I'm working on something. I'm working on a new book that I can't reveal too much about. So that is one thing, but I work on that quite slowly because I am very busy with Sunea. And I am very happy to be in a company with a tech vendor that has decided to do something very bold and very different. So, what I'm very occupied with these days is explaining what we mean by a federation of a federated, I should say, knowledge graph. That is something that has been on the roadmap in Cinea for quite a while, and it's really at the forefront of innovative data management. Something that I'm very happy to be part of, and it is, as I see it, not the only, but one central way to one of the important ways you can decentralize metadata management, which is something that has been going on in technologies that were very static and very monolithic. Just like a data layer itself is getting or has been getting decentralized by the movement of data mesh. So I think I'm at a very sweet spot in explaining very state of the art technology that is very hands-on useful. I mean, you can it's not a theoretical discussion. You can very concretely see how you can work with data in a new and more easy way, and that's super fun to be part of. I mean, that is just a gift to work like that.
Hmm, that's very interesting. So it is on top of data mesh. Uh, I think we can just linger onto this problem. So just to make
Hmm.
sure I understand correctly, it takes from data mesh decentralized aspect.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and you said that it's based on knowledge graphs.
Yeah, so
So
Senia.
so if you were to explain it a little bit further to me, I'm familiar to the concept of data mesh. So let me for everyone who is listening try to put words on data mesh. even though there is an entire O'Reilly great book that explains it in many pages. So let's see what I can do with a few words. But correct me if that's incorrect, and then I would love to understand more about about what you're working on and what you're describing. So data mesh, decentralized data management. So we have all the data of one company that have different project owners. Let's say we have sales, marketing, HR, and they all have like some specific data. And each person on those departments are like the owner of the data, and they can build specific projects around this data, and they can use data from other departments or on other part of the company, just asking the data owners of those parts. And so it really allow the company to iterate way faster, because it is not like one person that is in control of all the data governance, but it is really like pro sharing and cooperation and building based on and getting access to the data that we need on demand on from a decentralized perspective. So this is how like the words I would put on data mesh. And so on top of that, could you first of all correct me if you want to add anything about data mesh, and second of all help me understand better what you just described?
Yeah, yeah, Thomas. It's not my nature to try to correct people. It's not how, it's not how I operate. But yeah, no, I would agree very much in those definitions. I think I would add that for me, the most central aspect of a data mesh is the fact that we've had several generations of centralized data platforms, both on premise and in the cloud. And they all suffer from the very fact that they are centralized, right? You have an increasing amount of data providers and an increasing amount of data consumers that have been forced to pass through these centralized platforms, right? And that comes with a lot of things, like comes with a canonical data model, that comes with the fact that you should comply with certain formats and standards and procedures, and you should have a ticket, and then you wait. I mean, it's very clear that these centralized setups, they do not scale at the pace of supply and demand for data. And you could say, is that important? Not necessarily so if you're in an industry that is not disrupted by technology, but I see very few industries that are not disrupted by technology.
Yeah.
So you really, if you want to stay competitive and you want to up your game in terms of meeting the performance of your competitors, you need to somehow be able to exploit data better. And there's been a lot of cliches about that, but really, what data mesh so originally did was say, okay, let's try to equip each and every domain with the technologies that was monopolized and made monolithic by this centralized approach and centralized team. So each the departments that you mentioned, sales, marketing, and HR, they should all have the possibility to store, expose, share, and make accessible the data that they have in their own domains. Of course, requires a lot of technological insight in these domains, but that's also something that's happening these years, right? IT is not the only department performing IT in a company anymore. Those days are long, long gone. So so that's how I see data mesh, and it can unfold in a very, very refined theoretical way. That you just mentioned the data mesh book, right? That's a very like academic approach, very visionary approach. I have nothing against that, but many companies would say that this is a little too fine to the future for us. So I'm also very influenced by Peter Strengholz's book, Data Management at Scale, another cool book on the subject. That's a little more pragmatic and realistic in terms of what you can do to make your data architecture scalable. That's why it's called Data Management at Scale. Which is the big promise of a decentralized approach, right? That you can scale your data architecture and in that way
Hmm.
remain or even become even more competitive, right?
Hmm.
Now, I'm sure your listeners know this, but just I want to make very, very sure that no one thinks that you can buy a data mesh. No technology will give you a data mesh. That's completely. completely out of scope.
Mm-hmm.
Technologies can support a data mesh, but there is no data mesh technology per se. It doesn't exist and it shouldn't exist because it's not the technology, it's a way of working, it's a social technical mindset. Comes with organization, with processes, people, and an array of technologies.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do Synea play into this? Well, we do something very unique, which is very fun to explain. What we have launched and what we will be talking about is um, is what we call the Federated Knowledge Graph. Now, it will not give you a data mesh. That's exactly
Okay.
what a vendor will not give you, right? However,
Mm-hmm.
what we will give you is the capability to work with your metadata in a way that will enable you to mirror your data mesh in the data layer. Now, many of the technologies that expose the data mesh, they have had this monolithic setup themselves, and it's not the same consequences, but it's the same mechanisms at play in the metadata layer. That's why it's the first time I saw that roadmap for Synea, I was like, "Whoa, this is pretty interesting," um, because at the metadata layer, many technologies force you to have one um, meta model of how you want to organize your data at a metadata layer. If it's a static meta model, comes from the vendor predefined, then it's easy to fill out. However, it doesn't match your company reality, so it's not very cool. Or more than cool, I should say, it's not very effective. It's not very powerful. You can't
Mm-hmm.
really organize your data, and then you can't really search it again afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then came knowledge graph powered data catalogs. There's a handful of those. Sanea is one of them. And it's a way better way to organize and search for your data because you have such a big amount of data represented at the metadata scale that if you
Right.
want to powerfully rank your search hits and find what you're searching for,
Mm-hmm.
then you need graph technology, just like Google is built on graph
Mm-hmm.
technology. Um, it's just a way, way more powerful way to rank and organize and search your data, which is the core message of my book. Maybe we should have talked about my book, but that's like the core message of my book. That how you organize data defines how you can search it. So I explain domain architectures and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we are doing in Synea today is saying, okay, not only do we have a knowledge graph, we have a federated knowledge graph, meaning that the meta model that we put forward in our technology is not only flexible, it's flexible in multiple dimensions, meaning that one domain can express the way they see the world uniquely as it is seen from that domain, which may overlap or be completely isolated or even oppose the rest of the company. Now, the cool thing about that is that if you have a big company that has bought other brands or other companies, those meta models they will never match.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just simply no way that there's no other technology on the market that is capable of building that reality inside one solution.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the power of the federated knowledge graph. It's the fact that you can build multiple visions of the universe inside one technology. That's really really powerful. I mean, think of so because you have to think. It doesn't deliver the same thing as the data mesh, and it certainly doesn't deliver the data mesh. But the reality around these metadata technologies have been very much the same, right? It's been something that forced your metadata layer into one technology using one meta model, and that may have been static or more modern approach with a graph. It would be flexible, but it would still be one Now, with the federation of the graph, you can actually build multiple versions of that, and that scales.
Hmm. Huh.
Yeah.
I have two paths here because for everyone who's listening, I want everyone on the Let's Okay podcast to get to know you better. Talking about your PhD, the
Oh, yeah.
book that you wrote in collaboration with O'Reilly, which would put a lot of fundamentals into that. But I also want to to dig deeper onto this because I'm really curious about it, and I feel like I'm not familiar with the concept, so I'm super curious. So I think
Maybe we
yes.
can do this, Thomas. Maybe I explain a little bit about my background and why I ultimately joined Sinea, and
Mm-hmm.
then we can go back to the federated knowledge graph because there's actually a very nice intellectual continuation in these things. What do you think about that?
I love it. I love
Okay,
it.
okay, cool. Let's do that. So back in the days, I'm older than you, Thomas.
Are you?
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Anyway, I shouldn't age myself, but I am older than you, and I think so. Back in the days when I wrote my PhD at the University of Copenhagen, um, I did my PhD, also my MA, BA and MA in library information science. I really love that field because it combines the humanities in terms of understanding the nature of languages and the visions of how you see the world, really with philosophical dimensions, and then a more technological dimension with database structures, information retrieval, um, stuff like that, search engine mechanics, all those things. And I love that combination. I absolutely adored it. So I did a PhD. I also taught at the University of Copenhagen a lot of courses about how you organize data, information, and knowledge, and also how you search it again. The behaviors people have when they search, the tactics that you can apply when you develop technologies, want to promote stuff online, and so forth. These were the kind of courses that I taught, and I taught a lot of students in these courses. And then I went into industry. Um, and and in industry, well, I worked as a leader and a specialist and also an enterprise architect, focusing very much on data management, information management, and the associated technologies and the strategies that various companies had in these areas, right? And I really, really loved that. And that ultimately confronted me with data catalogs. And coming from university, having taught these courses, I was very much like, yeah, I'll be honest. The first time I saw data catalogs, I was like, "You cannot be serious. This is not. Is this really? You have spent so much money developing these technologies, proposing these capabilities, and you have not even uh, like, yeah, I shouldn't say this online, but I was just very, very surprised.
Yeah.
Let me say that. And I think the core message, what it all boils down to, was that data catalogs, they evolved from computer science, uh, or engineering, these fields of technology,
Hmm.
finally. So with my background, I saw that many of these technologies were poorly shaped to deliver on the capability that they promised to deliver on. Simply because I won't say that I'm better than any engineer that conceived these technologies. There was just a dimension lacking, simply lacking. That made me propose to Orelli my book, and they accepted it. And so I wrote it at night. Uh, and that's hard to do, and I'm doing that again now. But I love writing, and so my book was about this gap, about what had been missed in terms of data catalogs. My book is 100% tech agnostic. I politely describe all the data catalogs that I was confronted with, or have seen, or demos of, or knew of. I did in my book mention that I would tend to believe that knowledge graph powered data catalogs perform better than non-graph powered data catalogs, both in terms of the flexible meta modeling, that you can model the knowledge universe as you see it, not as a tech vendor sees it, and also in terms of retrieval, in terms of more powerful search, simply because it can rank more with more precision what hit would be most relevant for you. And that can be expressed mathematically, which I also do in my book. So, as I was writing my book, I discovered Cinea, and I was quite surprised they were circulating this white paper on LinkedIn and other social media saying "The Seven Lies of Data Catalog Vendors" was the title, and I got intrigued by that because I was writing on kind of the same energy, and so I got a demo, and I was quite blown away by Cinea, and so I invited them to write the preface or the foreword of my book, which Guillaume Baudet did, the chief product and technology officer in Cinea, and then after the book was published, I joined. I was asked if I wanted to join Cinea, and I joined Cinea some months after the publication of my book. So again, my book is 100% tech agnostic. It's basic introduction to data catalogs. But I had no doubt when I was invited that could be fun, and so I joined Cinea. And so once I joined Cinea, I of course was put in a position. I'm part of the C-suite, so I am very lucky to both to travel and discuss a lot of strategic stuff. And I was of course presented with the roadmap, and we made some adjustments to the roadmap, or we combined some stuff. I prefer to say it like that. And the vision of the federated graph was already there when I joined, but I think that what I could contribute with was the fact that just like the core message of my book is how you organize data defines how you can search it, I saw a potential of I saw an increased potential of how you can organize data with a federated knowledge graph, and how you can search it again in a very powerful way. So that really, the nature of this software is very much in line with my ideas. But then I saw a parallel that no one had seen inside Cinea, and that's the fact that Cinea actually offers the same thing at the metadata layer that the entire data mesh movement offers at the data layer. Completely surprising to me. Once I realized it, I was like, but this is brilliant, because the metadata layer has been suffering from the centralized approach for decades, and it has led to an enormous amount of data catalog implementation gone wrong, simply because simply because once you can't organize your data in a way that matches the reality in your company, and once you can't, then you can't find it again. That's a technological consequence of not being able of organizing your data correctly. The 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 machinery, the technology, will not be able to calculate how you search for data. And regardless of what you want to use a data catalog for, searching, being able to search your data is the entry point in a data catalog. So so anyway, that was a long rant to market. Did it make any sense to you?
It makes total sense.
Okay,
I
good.
love it. There are many points about it, and we'll go back to, like you promised, to 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 the curiosities that I have uh, about this knowledge graph metadata layer. So, if I understand correctly, uh, I know you won't correct me, but feel free to update what I say
Yeah,
at
yeah.
any time. So, if I understand correctly, we're a lot of companies, because this is such an interesting journey. With all your expertise, writing a book about data catalog, it feels like this is one of the core book of um, of what any company needs to read, because of course any company is not like, let's say, a big tech company or OpenAI, and so there is a huge gap in between best practices and what's going on in the field. So that being said, I'm super curious about the journey of writing the book and how it still shapes. I'm super curious about the depth and the comparison between the data layer and the metadata layer. And so, when everyone is focused on being decentralized from a data layer perspective, what does it mean? Thinking about the metadata perspective, and like I'm curious if you have any example about that. I'm just like stating different things, and then I'll come back to my question. But that's very interesting. Coming back to the history side of things,
Mhm.
I it feels to me that data has always been one of the biggest breakthrough of the human being, because we are now, because since, so you mentioned at the beginning some philosophy and history of languages and so on. And if we think about it, at the very beginning, when like tribes were starting to create and so on, and when people were going into the agricultural era and so on, so people started having homes and lands, and so we needed to register these kind of things. I feel
Mhm.
like the Sapiens books retrieve perfectly all this history side. And to me, it really enhances the fact that data at scale is really how humanity is able to uh, cooperate at such a high scale. So now I'm coming to my question, which is before coming back to what we said at the beginning. But I'm very curious, with all your expertise, all the people you've seen, the data catalogs, data architectures that you've been able to see, how do you feel about the data revolution in a sense? Because if we think like 2013, we had like Hadoop and Spark kind of getting going, and then cloud, but it is also recent. And if we look at human history, like what's going on right now is mind blowing, and to me feels like one of the biggest advancements in technologies, just in terms of what we can do. So I just wanted to ask you, as an author of the data catalog O'Reilly book, um, also the work that you're doing, and I'll come back to the metadata and data layer, and I want to
Mhm.
know more about that. But just from an history perspective, language perspective, philosophy perspective, what do you think about all that's going on, and the pace at which it is going on?
Yeah, I love that question. It's a beautiful comparison, drawing a parallel back to the first agricultural societies and our present societies, and exactly right and you're exactly right in the fact that writing and bureaucracy basically emerged out of that agricultural reality, taking lists of like ownership of animals and amounts of grains on farms and stuff like that. These lists in Mesopotamia, way back millennia back, were the first lists, right? That humans compiled, and that is a very beautiful analogy to our present reality that is also once again driven forward in many ways by a list culture, by data culture that is basically not a written culture, but more a noting culture, if you will, of stuff, listing stuff, right? Just at a totally different scale. But it's a very, very beautiful parallel, I think, Thomas, and that's very much actually in line with what I also wrote my PhD about, making comparisons of um, mnemonic techniques in antiquity and string search algorithms in the present. I made this very concrete comparison of how you can actually trace preprint mnemonic techniques of navigating texts mentally um, with the way algorithms work today. So I think that that deep medium theoretical, deep media history angle, it can teach us a lot about our present, way more than we as technologists normally accept, because an engineering reality is in many cases without any history, which is why we encounter the same problems again and again in engineering, right? Many of the data problems that we have faced before. Uh, so so uh, so I love the parallel. I think I'm a little less certain if I actually answered your question. Um,
No, yes. I was curious about um, so putting all this in frame and like having your opinion on this analogy, if you think it is something that we can look through this lens. And now, based on all those changes,
mhm,
and based on the, I would call, the state of the art of data catalogs in enterprise, for enterprise, um, if we come back to the metadata layer and data layer,
mhm,
uh, well, having this history in mind or not, I'm curious because I'm not sure if I understand it properly. So maybe you can help me out.
mhm.
But so, like I said before, when many companies are trying to implement data mesh and they're focused on the data layer and not on the metadata layer, would you have an example um, to understand what they're missing out when not looking into the metadata layer part of the catalog? Would that be something possible?
Oh yeah, yeah, very easy even, because if you want to build a decentralized data architecture
Yeah.
um, in your company, you need some way of looking at that data architecture, some lens by which you can envision that totality. Um, that is what Shamak Degani calls a experience plane. Um, Now it's been quite obvious for most technologists that this experience plane is a data catalog. You need a metadata tool that can kind of visualize and make searchable your entire uh, data architecture, and it becomes increasingly important if you decentralize, because ultimately, if you really want to, you could, it's not a good idea, but you could do without a data catalog in a centralized approach. You could argue that the data warehouse itself or the data lake itself would expose whatever it contained. It's not a good idea because it's too big to search manually by browsing folders or whatever you want to do. So it's not a good idea, but it could be done theoretically. I must stress that. If you go into a decentralized approach, then there's simply no way of knowing what domains exist and what data product sits in these domains if you do not have this experience plane that tells you it. You can shape that in many ways, and really hardcore data measures say that uh, you need a very thin layer, experience layer, that is more nothing more than a very neat portal that has been populated with the data products by the data products themselves, and I tend to like that approach quite a lot. It has a lot of shift left built into it, right? That you push all the responsibility to the providers where it actually belongs, right? So I like that. But the idea of a data catalog in a data mesh is something that you cannot really, you cannot put it out of, you cannot take it out of the equation. You need a lens to look at the landscape with. If not, you can't see the landscape.
Hmm.
Um, but then we can ask ourselves, but what is that lens like?
Hmm.
That's kind of where what I have always specialized in understanding how various registries or repositories or metadata tools or catalogs or whatever you want to call these tools. There's an array of tools doing that for various purposes, right? How do they work? How do they actually work? And what is quite surprising is that you have these ideas about very, very modern data architectures, but the technology by which you look at it has in many cases not been updated significantly, I dare say, for decades. It's a data catalog is something that, yeah, that has not evolved in sufficient in with sufficient pace, I dare say, in terms of the visionary underlying data architecture it was supposed to represent. And that's where I think our roadmap is very cool. And I totally don't want to make this just about Synea, but it is one thing you should avoid. Let me, instead of talking about Synea, one thing you should avoid is thinking that your data catalog or any other data technology delivers your data mesh. That's an intellectually disappointing vision. It's not at all the point of these technologies to deliver a data mesh for your enterprise. So if a vendor claims that, then think twice, I dare say, if you should go down that road, because it's not the point. It's not the point. But the problems that the data mesh tries to resolve, all the problems associated with the centralized approach, that very same problem is also at play at the metadata layer, meaning that you have a lot of suppliers, a lot of providers of data, and you have a lot of consumers of data. And they have to pass through, which is a paradox, right? Even in a data mesh setup, they have to pass through this centralized tool that forces them, all of them, to describe data in one specific way and to consume it in one specific way. And that is a total paradox with an underlying architecture that is decentralized and has liberated them from that from that time-consuming, ineffective, unscalable task, right? So the consequences are different at the metadata layer, but the mechanics at play are the same, and that I think is something that will be more and more clear for more companies going forward.
Mm.
I think it had. I mean, flexible meta modeling with a knowledge graph is already difficult to explain it in itself, but it simply means, for example, that well, you can't accept a specific, you can't propose a specific structure for your glossaries. You can't propose a specific structure for your domains. They are predefined by the vendor, and that's it, because it's a static technology. But if you have a knowledge graph technology, well, you can stitch together your knowledge universe as you want. There
Mm.
can be domains, there cannot be domains, or processes, how many layers. All of that is up to you to define.
Mm.
Um, that's a little difficult in the beginning, but the payoff is so great in terms of having correctly organized your data and making it searchable again. Now imagine that you're an old pharma company buying a new tech startup. That tech startup has a totally different IT landscape, a totally different way of doing stuff. Now that new tech company must comply with the old meta meta model in the data catalog, because it has to make its data discoverable and consumable for the entire company. There's just no way that that new company can can make its universe fit into that old company's vision of how to doing stuff. And that is exactly where a federated knowledge graph comes into play, because it can let that newly acquisitioned company define its own universe of knowledge, connecting on the very few points where they have overlapping interests with the old company, stitching it all together in a federated graph. Now that scales. That's the only technology at the metadata layer that scales. Anyway, Thomas, you can totally cut out if I talk too much about scenario.
No, no, no.
Just cut it out.
I'm super curious about everything you just said, and I was mapping everything in my head. So just to make sure I see it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, mm, all right, we have the data layer and the metadata layer. Would it be fair to call the federated knowledge graph, or I'm not sure how to say it, but like the metadata layer?
Mm-hmm.
Is it federated knowledge graph? Is it correct?
Yeah, totally. I mean, in our vision, we're the only one proposing a federated knowledge graph. It's a
Hmm.
unique innovation from SENIA,
Hmm.
but data mesh itself talks about federation,
Yeah.
federated computational governance,
Yeah.
spread out into the domains. So federation is a thing in the data layer. It was a thing, and it's necessary that it's a thing because if not, you cannot build a data mesh.
Right.
But the federation is also or can also be put at play at the metadata layer. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of it.
Yeah. It's like, so. Could we say that the metadata layer is kind of a marketplace, but
Mm.
a decentralized marketplace that have not only all the systems but all the projects that a company have? And if we take the merger that you mentioned before of the pharmaceutical company with the tech company, then maybe there are like some key points that needs to be connected, like some systems, some data that needs to be merged. And so this is where like the knowledge graph is the most scalable solution, because we just need to connect those specific points in the knowledge graph so that we know in the entire company, if we want to have like the big picture, it is just like this knowledge graph that merge everything, and then we can run any kind of optimized algorithm on this knowledge graph to understand better if I'm searching for a specific project or specific data in my company or in the company. I'll be able, using this kind of marketplace, let's say. So would that, like, would you update, so like, could this vision apply, or I'm missing a part of it?
No, that's pretty much it. So, I mean, that's our vision. Definitely, if you want to put forward data products, you do so on what we call an enterprise data marketplace, which is a layer sitting on top of our data catalog. It's not replacing our data catalog. It's sitting on top and it's fueled by a powerful data catalog. And the entire idea, of course, of a data product is that those are made consumable by the entire business. But the entire business has no, yeah, I'm going to say business again, in terms of how a specific domain catalog its data. It's not. It's like there's no need for a centralized team to define that,
Hmm.
and that only poses problems. So of course, all the domains put um, should put their data products on a shared enterprise data marketplace, of course. But the data that has been cataloged in the domain underneath can or cannot be shared with the rest of the organization, depending on the importance of it and
Mm,
the need to do it. So
right.
yeah.
Okay, I understand. Okay, I understand. It's previous to the marketplace. It is a way to, as we manage data products in terms of permission, access, and so on, we can also manage how much of all the information you can see based on like the retrieval that you're going to do, like if you want to search for specific things
Mhm,
from a metadata perspective.
mhm, mhm.
Oh, amazing. I understand. Okay, and now I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious about one thing. You said there is no company that will deliver a data mesh. Data
Yeah.
mesh is a concept, and it needs to be implemented and enhanced by the vision of the company. That being said, I'm curious about, let's say, for example, Databricks. It feels to me that Databricks are really trying to make this all-in-one platform so that you can really enhance those concepts. And they have their own data catalog. They have like you can build your lake house and like having like all your things, and you can integrate with a lot of tools. And it feels like they're like the more we go forward, the more tools they have in one solution.
Mm.
So what is your vision in terms of a project like Databricks, and what are the alternatives that you consider?
Yeah. First of all, Thomas, this has to be my last question because I have to run. Um, but um, I, you know, I don't want to comment on any other technology vendor. Of course, Databricks is a way bigger technology than Sonea, but I by principle won't comment on other technologies out there. Um, I want to say that um, the data mesh movement from the beginning was very clear in the fact that data mesh is not and should not be a technology. But of course, a lot of technologies deliver one or more capabilities of a data mesh. So it's sometimes a fine line to see the distinction between the technology and the data mesh as a concept that is certain. Um, if technologies directly claim that they deliver a data mesh, I would be cautious. The point of departure for data mesh is not a technology as such. And the reason why the warning has been put out is because it demands a lot of human effort, and it will also in the future demand a lot of human effort. So that anticipation that you can buy a mesh is simply like incorrect. But you can definitely buy technologies that supports your data mesh efforts, and very substantially so.
Hmm.
I hope that was a
Yeah,
clear enough answer.
perfect. Perfect. So we ran out of time. So where can people know more about you, and do you have a last message for everyone who is listening?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, Tuma, thank you for having me on. This is a great show. I've been watching some of the YouTube episodes. It's great setup. I love it. Thank you for inviting me. Please stay in touch. I think I don't know that I should have any last message except the fact that the data community, the global data community, is a great place to be. A lot of people exchange ideas, and that's how we should keep it. We should keep it friendly and open as a global learning community. Um, that's my message. I think in terms of where people can find me, LinkedIn is a great place. I also have a Mastodon profile and a Medium profile that people can follow. I am beginning to be more and more active, especially on Medium. But I mostly communicate through my LinkedIn.
Amazing. Did you want to add something else?
No. Thank you, Thomas, for having me on. This was great.
Awesome. I had an amazing time. I want to thank you for taking the time to coming on the show. For everyone who is listening, feel free to subscribe if you're still here at this part of the episode. This means that you're really into this in-depth content. I hope that you had value. Feel free to share comments and give us feedback. Like I said, thanks again, Ole, for coming on the show and taking this time to sharing with us. I wish you to have an amazing day.
You too, Thomas.